what's up you guys? Devin with Century Effects Studios. Today we're going to be talking about the R5 Mark II's rumored specs. Now, first off, it's not clickbait. I don't have the camera yet. Canon didn't send me the camera. I'm just not sponsored, nothing like that. I am an R5 user, the R5 Mark I, so to speak, because we're kind of assuming that Canon is going to refresh this camera and it's going to be called the R5 Mark II, is what we're assuming. We're also assuming these specs, so we don't know with 100% that these specs will come out. These are just my thoughts and thoughts from what Canon Rumors and another website has said. So Canon Rumors is one of the most reputable sites when it comes to, or one of the biggest sites when it comes to Canon rumors. We think that Canon might be plugging it, but we don't know that for sure. We just think that this guy knows what he's talking about, right? So he has a rating system of CR1, 2, and 3, and I think these were CR2 ratings. CR2 being, pretty high up there, maybe 60 to 70%. CR3 being 100% confirmed, and CR1, I think, being the lesser of the two, but it might be the opposite way around. Who knows? But CR2 is good no matter what. So these are CR2 level rumors from Canon Rumors and another site, but let's get right into it. Like I said, I'm an R5 user and I know exactly what the R5 needed based on what they're telling us, and I'm probably going to plug my opinion into this as well. So I'm going to be mixing all that information and experience and giving you these specs, telling you whether or not I think they're true, and telling you my opinions on where they should go. All right, so the R5 Mark II, 61 megapixels is what they're slating, and yeah, I think this is probably 100% true. And the reason why is because Canon, when they marketed the R5 Mark I, it was all about the 8K, and a lot of people didn't like the fact that they were marketing the R5 Mark II's 8K after it came out because it wasn't all that good at keeping the camera from overheating. So people were like, what's the point of having an 8K sensor or 8K video camera if you can't do that? So long story short, the 61 megapixels is now the highlight feature because the R5 and pretty much a lot of these Canon cameras are supposed to be photocentric cameras, and they're not supposed to focus on video as much. So now that they're leading with the new 61 megapixel sensor, a 61 megapixel sensor that they've never had before, more than their highest resolution body, the 5DS R and the 5DS, it makes a lot of sense because now they can focus on things that are different, because the 8K specs of the R5 Mark II that I'm about to go over is not different, or not that much different, from the 8K specs of the R5 Mark I. So they need another highlight spec in the 61 megapixels. Considering that Sony, their main competition, has a 61 megapixel sensor, it makes way too much sense for them to come out with one of their own. Finally, because Sony has had that 61 megapixel sensor in the A7R series for quite a while now. All right, and it being a backside illuminated sensor. I don't doubt this. Backside illumination technology is the new technology for sensors. It helps the camera read out information faster, keeping you from having artifacts like your golf club. If it swings too hard, it's going to make like a bending effect to the actual artifact. And I'm not talking about shutter speed. I'm talking about how fast the camera actually reads the scene. It's something that you can't actually compensate for. So that's something that they really need to fix in a backside illuminated sensor. Does a better job of fixing that. And they have one in the R3, which is like $6,500 when it came out, probably like $6,000, maybe less than that now, but it usually is around that price because it's closer to the flagship. The R1 technically is supposed to be a flagship, but they haven't come out with it yet. And they probably, are going to come out with that soon. And I'll talk about that in a bit. But yeah, backside illumination technology, they already have it. I don't doubt that they're going to put it in the R5 Mark II. Dual Digic X processors. The Digic X processor by itself is way more than enough for the 45 megapixel sensor of the R5 Mark I. I don't doubt that they're going to put a dual Digic X processor in this R5 Mark II because it's just, it will be so much better to have that, and it'll process information faster. You have the CF Express Type Bs that can handle it better than the CF Express Type A, and it's time for Canon to really show what that card can do because their competition is Sony, and Sony only uses CF Express Type A card slots, which cost more and are less effective than CF Express Type Bs. So therein lies Canon's little advantage here. So yeah, they're going to have that. All right, 30 frames a second electronic shutter with tracking. Yes, I see that coming because their new cameras have up to 30 frames a second. I think the R6 Mark II has it. I think some of the lower end cameras that are cheaper than the R5 Mark II have it. I want to say they have some new technology that the R5 doesn't have, like 40 frames a second, burst mode, or something like that. So I'm pretty sure the R5 Mark II will have something comparable, and it's definitely going to give you something worth your money in that regard of the 30 frames a second over 20 or 12 frames a second mechanical shutter. And I'm pretty sure the 12 frames a second mechanical shutter is a thing, because you still need a mechanical shutter to take away all the deficiencies of the electronic shutter, like flashing. Flashing hasn't been completely synchronized with your electronic shutter yet. I think Sony might have some new technology in that department, but you still need a mechanical shutter because of, flickering LED lights on a gym floor or something like that. Flickering LED lights in other places like theaters and stuff like that. We've always had issues with that banding, and so electronic shutters will help minimize that. So you have 8 stops IBIS. Yeah, 8 stops IBIS is going to be good. I don't doubt, because IBIS 8 stops, that whole 8 stops metric is not necessarily giving you the real life. You're probably going to get like 6 stops, but it's still going to be great. Canon's IBIS has always been great, and I don't doubt that they're going to refresh it for this camera. All right, the new high resolution mode similar to pixel shift. So dual pixel technology is what Canon uses for its focusing, but you can actually use pixel shift, which means it's going to take multiple pictures and stitch them together to make a higher resolution image. Now, this has been an issue in the past because other camera makers like Fujifilm and Sony, they can do that. And say, for example, if it was a 40 megapixel image and they come out with a 240 megapixel image at the end of the day, well, the moving parts, like I want to say leaves, if you're taking foliage, any kind of things that move and your camera can't stop it from moving, or your shutter speed can't stop it from moving, all these things always end up kind of blurred in the image, and it degrades the value of your image, and you can't do anything about it when you take a pixel shifted image, because your camera's literally moving its sensor to take it at different times in the blink of an eye, I guess. But Canon didn't put out that technology when Sony and Fujifilm put out that technology, because they noticed that a lot of people, I'm assuming that they noticed a lot of people were having issues with this. So typically when Canon comes out with this type of technology, it's going to be tighter than the issues that the other manufacturers are having. So that will be a nice leg up if they do have pixel shift technology. So I think they're going to bring it out because they haven't in the past, and it's been pretty much out in other cameras. All right, so another thing to think about is or another spec to think about is the 2x, 4x, and 8x digital teleconverter. So that basically means the camera's just going to be cutting into your image to get you closer to the subject. So this would be good for wildlife and anybody who is far away from their subject, but they still want to retain good image quality. Now, what people usually do, for example, look behind me right here. That's the 300 millimeter 2.8. Now, it's a fast glass and it's long glass. It's very telephoto, but it's not like bird telephoto, like 400 and 600 and 800 and 1200 millimeters in some cases for Canon, because they just came out with that lens. No, it does not have that reach, but it does have great image quality. So you want to use that great image quality, but you don't want to lose image quality by putting teleconverters on there. Well, when you put literal teleconverters on the front of your lens, you'll fix it. And what this does is it degrades your image quality, because you have a piece of glass in front of another piece of glass, another piece of glass. That degrades your image quality almost indefinitely. So what you have to do is deal with some lower image quality. Well, you have 61 megapixels. Why not just crop into an image that's already still and sharp? That might be better than just using teleconverters just to get closer to your image. As a matter of fact, you're probably more inclined to shoot more images because you have less tunnel vision, and you can probably crop in a little bit more in post. So it's a good idea to have a digital teleconverter in this case, because we have so many pixels that we don't necessarily always need. As a matter of fact, most people bought the R5 Mark I for its cropping ability. You can get close to your subject without having to worry about putting teleconverters on there and having the sharpest lens on the planet, because it's trying to get the most out of your image already. So the next spec, and I do think this is a thing, is really probably the simplest technology that they can put in the camera is to have a digital teleconverter. As a matter of fact, you can crop and post, but the camera's just doing this for you now. So, and it probably will still have the same 3:2 aspect ratio of the full frame sensor. So, so now it's saying same dual pixel AF2 like it's in the R3 and the R6 Mark II. And I don't doubt that. It's easy for Canon just because it probably takes a lot of technology to do dual pixel AF. And dual pixel AF, even though it was great when it first came out, it got even better with the dual pixel AF Mark II. And this is what you're using for, I think, all your live focusing. So that's video and photos. But it has a Mark II version. When the 80D and the 70D came out, this is when it really got popular, and it used to just use contrast detection, and that's not good. This is one of the biggest features of Canon cameras is its ability to be able to focus, and not only just focus, but focus in video. So dual pixel AF Mark II, I don't doubt that it's going to do that, and they're just going to bring it down from the other cameras because it takes a lot of work for them to improve that autofocus system. And they've been still coming out with firmware updates, but I haven't updated to the latest firmware of the R5 Mark I. So I don't know exactly where they are in that technology, and I haven't used the R3 or the R6 Mark II, but I'm pretty sure it's going to come down to the R5 Mark II. All right, internal 8K at 60. 8K at 60, I don't doubt that they're going to have 8K at 60. It's just a leap from 8K at 30 RAW from the R5. So if they can do internal 8K RAW at 30, there's no doubt that they can do 8K 60 at least in IPB or all-I, because they don't take as much memory to, and the CF Express Type B is already one of the best cards to do it. So, and Sony's using CF Express Type A, which is a little bit less memory, it utilizes a little bit less memory at a higher cost. I don't think it's as fast as CF Express Type B, and it's also more expensive. So, so that's something to think about. But on the other hand, Sony does have dual CF Express Type A card slots, which Canon has yet. I think they might have it in the R3, but they have yet to bring this down to the R5 system, excuse me. So, yeah. 8K recording, having dual redundancy recording would be good. It just all depends on what kind of card slots they put in this R5 Mark II, whether or not it can truck all that memory. And then also the HDMI. There's a whole bunch of things that I need to get into, but I think they're going to do the 8K at 60. Also, 4K, 30, 60, and 120 frames a second. They already have this in the R5 Mark I, but the 120 frames a second at 4K is not with sound. This has not been a big issue with me, but also what becomes a big issue with the 4K 120 is that it already puts it on a 24 frames a second timeline when I pull it out the camera. I have no ability to speed ramp it and do it everything. I have to go down to 4K 60, which is not that bad of a trade-off, but I want my full, flexibility of 120 frames a second at 4K. So I don't have to worry about, having a speed limitation or a slow down limitation because the camera's already done it for me. And it's also that is going to be oversampled. So they're going to bring that in there. I just want to know exactly what they're going to be doing with that 120 frames a second, that 120p. Is it going to be already conformed on a 24? Is it already going to be outputted at 24 frames a second? That's all I really want to know. Full HD at 240 frames a second, I don't doubt that. The quality of these FPSs is going to vary. I know that 30 frames and 60 frames and 120 frames a second and 240 frames a second is going to have a different quality. You might be saying to yourself, oh, well, Devin, 4K is already good quality and 1080p is already lower. So what do you mean? No, I'm saying 1080p can be low quality and 1080p can be high quality. 4K can be low quality and 4K can be high quality. Brought to you by the R5 Mark I. The R5 Mark I has a low quality HD mode, 4K mode, and it also has a high quality 4K mode. You might be saying, why would it do that? Well, when it's chucking a certain amount of memory, bending pixels, and doing all these other things to make that image happen and give you all these different 4K options, some of them have to come at a cost because of how many pixels the camera has. So that's something to think about as well. Focus breathing correction. I have never seen this in a camera, but I do know that Sony cameras now have focus breathing corrections. And the last time I was filming that video of the 7D Mark I in 2023, that video, I had troubles with focusing with an 85 millimeter. I was trying to film myself with an 85 millimeter just to give a different look, but it was focus breathing, like it was cool breathing in and out, and I could literally see it in the viewfinder, the small viewfinder on the R5 from as far back as I needed to be, and it was just looking like, it was like you were going on a roller coaster how much focus breathing it was having. I was using Viltrox 85 millimeter 1.8, which I'll get to in just a moment in another video, but focus breathing correction would correct this, and I love that they're thinking about this if they're going to do this. I have no idea if they're going to do this, but I would love if they did, because they have 61 megapixels to use on that sensor. If they use some of these megapixels to focus breathe correct some of these images instead of cropping into the images, because as you know, the EOS R cropped in, and a couple of other of the smaller R cameras, or the lower level R cameras, the ones that don't cost as much, they start to crop in when you use 4K. Well, instead of cropping in for a bad reason, why don't they just use those extra megapixels to focus breathe correct some of these lenses, because these lenses go in and out when you're, and that's one of the telltale signs that you have a cheap lens. It's a cheap production. So that would be an amazing new feature that I've never seen in a Canon camera, and I'll be amazed at that. Now, since Sony has it, you're competing, which is good, and it makes it a better reason for Canon to bring it out. But I would love this. This will be one of the features that will make me want to have this camera. All right, overheating protection. R6 Mark II has this, and at least 40 minutes for 8K video and over. Yes, so it's gonna be built in, but the R5 didn't have it built in. You had to upgrade your firmware, but the R5 Mark I had it, so there's no reason to think that the R5 Mark II doesn't have it. The only thing that the R5 Mark II didn't have in this spec is the actual 40 minutes and over. I can't film more than what, 40, 50, 20 minutes on the R5, depending on what mode I'm in, especially if I'm going like 4K 60. It cuts me down. I forgot how much because I use the Ninja now, but it would be good to have something like that internally. The only difference is having those messy coded files from Canon coming out of your camera at 40 minutes and then trying to edit it and it's not in ProRes. It's like, ooh, that's bad. Now I know that the new iPhones are coming out with ProRes. Is it too much to ask Canon to get licensed to put ProRes in their DSLRs? Because these files that we're putting out of the Canon cameras are not only long and they are hard to edit, but it's just like it destroys our computers. So, I mean, if I had a 4K file from a Panasonic camera, a G7, which I use all the time at 100 megabytes a second, it's a fine, it's fine to edit. Like I could be shooting for 6 hours on that camera once I put it in service mode, and it does everything that I needed to do, and I don't have to worry about my computer slowing down or clogging up doing this stuff. But when the camera, like the R5 and any other Canon camera that has 4K and up, when you put those files in the computer, it is so hard to manage, let alone 4K, 8K, or any fast frame per second 4K image. It's just, or video. It's just so hard to blend it in with another camera and have, we need ProRes or some kind of format that allows us to actually use these files that we're getting out of this camera. So if you're talking about 8K 60, is that compressed file format that Canon gives me? I don't want to suffer behind my computer. So even though these specs probably are true, and they have come out with some similar specs in the R6, and some, I think, lower level cameras probably have it that are new, that's something to think about. Do you even want to go through the pain that an 8K file or a 40-minute file from 8K would do? So 60 minutes for video and 4K, I mean, I don't see that being an issue. I'm pretty sure they're going to have that. Dual CF Express Type B. All right. I think that they need to do this. And the reason why is because the CF Express Type B is so good. And then when you come to find out that companies like Angelbird are giving you cheaper options for the 512 gigabyte cards, It makes life so much easier. If I rate my images, put them on a CF Express Type B when I take them, and then dump them off in the Lightroom, start editing right away, I save at least half the time. I cut my time in half when I'm editing and doing anything else. Now, if I put video on the CF Express Type B, we got some issues. But there's something to think about when you talk about the CF Express Type B, because now we might have dual redundancy when recording because we have two of the same card slots. There's so many benefits to having two card slots that can match up to each other because you can do way more with the camera. This is probably where the R5 Mark I was a little bit crippled because you had the SD UHS-2 card slot, which is not going to match up to CF Express Type B card slots at all. And I've always been a big CF card fan because even when they was out in the 7D Mark I, because they're indestructible. They're not like the CF, the SD cards, because the SD cards, they're brittle, they break, they're thinner. You can lose them easier, but the CF Express Type B, it seems like the correct card for any camera, to be honest with you, because your files and memories are the most important part. And if you have a cheap card that you're putting in your camera, that's how much you care about your things getting broken and damaged. So that's something to think about. Standard HDMI port. Oh my goodness. If Canon comes out with this, they have been thinking about us, because I'm using the HDMI port on the, I think it's like a mini HDMI port on the R5 going into the Ninja. I promise you, I have bought too many of those because they are small ports. They come out easily. They don't have anything to lock them in place, and usually you're using like a small, like what I want to say 6-inch to 7-inch cable coming out of your R5 to your Ninja to be portable, but that puts a lot of strain on the cable and the port. So if it's not a big port to begin with, it doesn't have as many teeth to grab into the little port. And I'm just saying, if they had that, that would be amazing, but I'm not sure they're going to have it. As a matter of fact, I kind of doubt it because Canon has never done it, and we've always needed. Canon has always been popular for video, even though they're not the most functional video cameras as far as outputting to HDMI. They have always been great at giving you good autofocus and giving you full frame video and faster glass on cameras that have big sensors. So it would be great for them to have a full size HDMI port. All right, so dual USB-C. I don't even use the USB-C on my R5. But if they had that, I'm pretty sure it's better than just having one. I mean, you probably can do dual recording if you had power delivery from your Anchor or power pack, whatever you're using. I call them anchors, but you know what I'm talking about. The power packs that you use to charge everything else. All right, 9.44 million dot EVF. I don't doubt that. It's going to have that. One thing that I'm thinking about is a dual flippy turny screen that they might have as far as the visual, because a lot of companies are now going to this dual flippy screen where it can slide out and you can look down at it and peer up, and you don't have to worry about it flipping out and blocking this HDMI cable. That's for the screen itself. But they said now the new spec here is the newly designed LCD monitor optimized for video shooting. So I don't know what that means. Like I said, Sony has their own way of doing it, but Canon, this will be a new step for Canon in a different direction. They've had this flippy articulating screen, and it's been popular for like the 70D, the T4i, the 80D, 90D, and all these other cameras in between. But if they have it at a new angle now where you can use it on a gimbal better, you can use it on different things better, that would be amazing. But it's not a go-to like, oh my goodness, it's great for me. I'm comfortable with this on the R5 Mark I. Let's see here. The launch time would be Q2 2023, and that's coming up extremely soon. So we've gotten through all the specs. Some of these specs I think were mirrored on another website, slightly different, but most of them came from Canon Rumors and another website. I forgot what it was, but I want to say 90% of these specs should be true. And I'm pretty sure Canon will put a curveball in there that nobody knows about. And for us, it was 8K last time, I think. They might have rumored that, but a lot of people probably thought that it wasn't a thing. So let's get into what I think in general what Canon should bring. All right, so here's some of the issues that I noticed with the R5. Now, most of these things are nitpicky. Pretty much the R5 is one of Canon's best cameras, and I love the R5. Let's start out with that. But let me talk about some things that are weird that I didn't even think about. Now, one, the camera locks up. And I'm not saying this because I'm probably at firmware version 1.5, but the camera does lock up. Usually happens when I'm in electronic shutter mode. This usually doesn't happen when I'm in mechanical shutter mode. I've never had that issue, but typically I'm using third-party lenses like Sigma art lenses or older Canon lenses, like this 300mm back here. It how do I say this? It will freeze up if I take 20 frames a second, go to 20 frames a second, and then I hit the playback button really fast. It's kind of like Sony cameras back in the day, or like the A7R II, which is actually up here behind me as well, over here. That way. All right. But it's like the Sony A7R II. Back when Sony first made their high megapixel mirrorless bodies, when they came out with those, it couldn't handle the amount of memory that was going through it. So when you would hit playback, it would say busy, 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 busy. But the Canon doesn't say busy as much. If not, it never says busy to me. It might just like, it'll freeze up and it'll look like it's taking pictures when you're not releasing the shutter, and it'll just be black. But none of these pictures will actually go into your CF card or your SD card, whatever you're using. But you have to drop the battery, put it back in there, and keep going. Now, it's a little bit of a hindrance, and if I was shooting every day for a month, it will probably happen like once a week. So it's, I do sports a lot. And if you don't do sports, you probably won't experience this as often, but it is a little bit of a hindrance. But it doesn't delete any of your pictures. So if you got the picture, you know you got the picture, you're good. But once that frame gets black, it's not recording anything else. It's just showing you, like, say for example, what it looks like for you when you're shooting 20 frames a second, except the frame is black, and you'll just see those brackets just go like this, like you're actually taking pictures, but you're not actually taking pictures. And that's what happens when it locks up on me. It hasn't given me like a froze screen, but you can't do anything else. So you have to drop the battery and then put it back in there. And it saves everything. It saves their time. It saves everything. Like, I don't think it puts the camera out of sync or anything like that, but it definitely does cause a bit of an issue. So correcting that locking up, because a lot of people are having issues with that. That's not an issue that we used to have with DSLRs at all. So that's something specific to these cameras. Now, going along with that, the next issue would be the readout speed. Now, like I said, the readout speed is probably one of the fastest on any mirrorless camera because it's using the electronic shutter to send and receive all this information, and the camera reads from top to bottom, if I'm not mistaken. So the time that it reads each frame from top to bottom, it needs to have the least latency between reading those frames as much as possible. Because what it'll do is when you see that, you'll have a warpy looking wing on a bird, or a warpy looking tennis racket, or a warpy looking golf club, and with things that move extremely fast because the camera can't read it in time, even if you're at the best shutter speed, because the camera didn't read it at the right shutter speed. It's kind of confusing, but the readout time for the camera can be minimized as much as possible, and I think that dual processor and that backside illuminated sensor will extremely help that. It's probably going to be eliminated. Also, an ability to actually tune the shutter speed. I think some Canon cameras have this in the video mode. You have an 8-stop increment where you can finally tune the video, but we need to have this in picture too, because being able to finally attune the shutter speed will allow us to get between each one of those banding shots. Because I shoot a lot in the theater, and the theater have their own lights. I'm not allowed to flash in there unless they're not doing the play. So when I'm shooting in the theater, I need to make sure that no matter what light they use, no matter what rate it flickers at, that the Canon camera won't make flickering. Now, I was using the A7R Mark II back in 2018 or 2019, and I noticed that it was flickering and stuff like that on some images. Not all images, but I can't control what light they use when they use it. All I can do is be a good photographer. So with this issue, we need to make sure that that's corrected, and we need to make sure, I'm pretty sure the new processor will correct that for the most part, but be able to tune it depending on what lighting situation we are in. And I want the camera to be able to tell me when the flickering is happening, because you don't really see it on the back of the screen. Another thing, we already talked about this, but I'm gonna go over it again. The HDMI port, it needs to be bigger. The cameras are the only thing that I've known to use smaller HDMI ports, but the issue is that it's small and it doesn't latch into the camera very well. And then when you really are moving, because right now I'm looking at the the Ninja and the Ninja's facing me, where it can be also flipped around and facing you, the camera operator. But if the camera operator is not on there, I'm flipping around facing me, right? Well, the cord has to wrap around the camera in certain ways, and it has to, you see what I'm saying? Because the cord is on the left side of the camera, which is over here, but the cable is now on the right side of the on this side of the Ninja, and with a 6-inch cable, you got to wrap it around the camera. It causes shorts. The bigger the port, the less likely it is to pull out of that port. It's just pretty much physics. Like if you have a bigger plug into it, it's less likely to come out. But if you have a really, really small plug, like an HDMI mini, it's probably going to come out of that port. I never really think about the port coming out of the actual Atomos Ninja 5 because it's a bigger port. But every time I look at it from the standpoint of the camera and I see the HDMI mini, I'm thinking about a short that might happen. And usually most people buy an external recorder when they're using the HDMI port. Well, this is going to cause an issue because it's always going to be it's going to be sending that signal out to the HDMI port there. And if I'm using just that as my main footage, if it breaks or has a short, it's toasted. You see what I'm saying? Now you might be saying, well, why don't you just record on your CF Express Type B card while you're recording the Ninja footage? Well, therein lies an issue too, because the CF Express Type B, even though it's great, the code of the video that's coming out of the R5 is so hard to work with. So yeah, I might use that as a backup, but I also have to have a memory card in my camera, 2 of them, that match the SD card, or the not SD card, but the solid state drive that is in the Ninja. So if I had a 2 terabyte Ninja up top, I would need a 2 terabyte CF Express Type B and another 2 terabyte CF Express Type B to have dual redundancy on top of the fact that I already have. Like I said, the hard drive doesn't cost as much as the CF Express Type B, even if I were buying Angelbirds. Now, Angelbird has made it great to have us have a reliable card that allows us to go into both card slots, CF Express Type B and SD card, but they're still expensive cards, and anything can fail at any time. But that's something also you need to think about. It gets extremely expensive because Canon's codes are hard to put and edit into the video. So you might be saying 8K RAW, 4K RAW is another thing that I want. I mean, because 8K RAW is great, but you can't give me a smaller size file to output 4K RAW. Think about it. Now, the Atomos Ninja, what I'm using, the little small recorder, at the Ninja 5, it records 4K RAW, but the R5 does not put out 4K RAW. And I'm just sitting here scratching my head like, I got 8K RAW, but I don't have 4K RAW. And then here's another little caveat. The Ninja 5 does not record 8K RAW. It doesn't even record 8K. So I can't have ProRes 8K RAW out of my Ninja 5 because it can't go all the way up to 8K. So if you put in an 8K on a Canon camera or the R5, it's going to be like, well, I can't read that, and it's not going to show the signal. It's something weird that's going to happen because I tried it before. But you can't do it. And now you're telling me that Canon's not outputting a 4K RAW signal, and 8K RAW is what they have, and I got to be confined to having all of that heat drawing to my CF Express Type B, which are now 2. Now I have a dual processor, trucking all that information, and it's hard enough to edit those files. I'm just going to be like, I don't want to use it because I'm on a timeline. Any professional person who is buying this camera is going to be on a timeline, and our computers need to be beefy just to read these files, and it's going to slow us down. It's inefficient. Even though I do want to use 8K and I do want to use 8K RAW, I'm trying to teach myself how to color grade. And that 70 video color grading skills or my color correcting skills weren't all that great. But C-Log3, C-Log3, Rec 709 or Rec 2020, shooting through ProRes, you want to be able to get all the color information that you can possibly get. And of course, C-Log2 would be something nice to have because I heard C-Log2 was a better gradable footage, to have. So C-Log2 4K RAW instead of 8K RAW, because I don't really care much about 8K RAW right now. That means that my Canon R5 still has life, because if I get a recorder that does, external recorder that does 8K RAW, then it would make it a lot better for me. Now, here's another thing that is an issue with the R5 that nobody is really talking about. And they may have not had this issue pop up, but the hot shoe is loose. And it's not just the R5, it's the R6, which means it's a production issue on the Canon side. Now, I did have to open my R5 up and go through it and find out that the screws were just sitting under a little tab that was actually made in the circuit board of the R5. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, oh, you could just screw it in from the top. No, the actual screws screw in from the bottom of the R5 for the hot shoe mount, and the R6. I'm pretty sure for almost all Canon cameras. Now, if we look at the, I think the 80D is up here somewhere, because I just sold my 70 Mark I. The 80D is a camera that has had a hot shoe on it since it was made, and that was 2010s. So we're in 2023 now, and we got a camera that's not, what, 3-4 years old, and the hot shoe is just loosey-goosey moving around, and I couldn't even trigger my flashes with it. And I was scared to put my Ninja 5 back on it because it was so loosey-goosey. See, the thing about it is the hot shoes have never had an issue. Even cameras that are like super old, like some of the first cameras that probably had hot shoes, have never had this issue. Now, we're using hot shoes more than we've ever used hot shoes because of now all the flash triggers, the speed lights, but now we have monitors that weigh a little bit more, and they have monitor mounts on them, cages, rigs, all these things are utilized, and they are around the hot shoe, putting pressure on the hot shoe. A lot of times we mount stuff. So you would think that these hot shoe screws would be the tightest, tightiest screws that you've ever found, but for whatever reason, the R6, and probably the R6 Mark II, I'm not sure about the R6 Mark II, have loose screws that can make your flashes ineffective, make massive misfires on your flashes, and may even make your HDMI cord cause shorts, because if your HDMI monitor is moving like this and the cable's moving in and out and in and out, then it can unplug itself probably. You see what I'm saying? So there's a lot of different things to make this a Loctite system. And the word Loctite is a very important word, or important brand, because I had to put Loctite on the screw. I had to literally pull my R5 apart, something that I did not want to do. Pull all the, it was like 30 screws. I had to pull it down in half and then put Loctite on screws that should have been already Loctite to begin with. I mean, this is a camera that when I purchased it, I thought that I was going to have it for years, or at least sell it to get that value back to, and then upgrade for years to be a smart investor. But if the screws are coming out when they shouldn't be, that's an issue. So I hope they fix that for this camera. I got on a little soapbox from that one, but that's something that needs to be fixed. Battery life. Now, I've noticed that some of the new cameras have really good battery life with the LPE6 gold stripe battery. LPE6H NH batteries. So I really want that from the Canon camera. I mean, the battery life I've gotten used to, but I did just order me 2 new LPE6 NH batteries. So that's something that I want on this Canon camera bad, because if I have a more efficient battery flow through my camera, I don't have anything to worry about. I can use my camera more often. I don't have to keep changing. Anytime you got to change lenses or change batteries, it's always going to, leave you in a position to miss a picture. And these are some of the things that the camera can't have. So overheating, you don't want any overheating. I'm pretty sure Canon has fixed that. I haven't had an issue ever since I've cut on that overheating warning thing off on my camera. If you have a Canon R5, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You need to upgrade to the latest firmware if you haven't. But the R5 Mark I has not had an issue. I haven't had any melted components to my knowledge. When I opened the camera up, it didn't look melted. I didn't smell any electronic issues. So recording, I record sometimes in long bursts, but I've been using the monitor now because I'm afraid that now they have that overheating warning system on there where you can cut off the overheating lights. I'm afraid that it might degrade the components in the camera over time. So I'm using the R5 or the Ninja V5V to keep that the temperature down a little bit. But it does get hot. It does get hot. And with a dual CF Express Type B card slot system on the R5 Mark II that I'm thinking they're going to have, it's probably going to get hot as well. So that's something to think about. The electronic shutter. Now, when the R5 came out and I started using it, started renting it, when the R5, the Mark I came out, getting used to electronic shutter was a hard thing for me because you don't really get any tactile, any physical feedback, any like noises to let you know exactly how close you are to hitting the buffer. It's silent, but that might come to a detriment if you know that you use the DSLRs and all these other cameras that utilize a shutter that has a click to it. You can get used to when the buffer is about to happen. You can hear it slow down, but you can't hear that at all with the electronic shutter. So when you're shooting like a kiss or something like that, there's been a couple of kisses where I missed it because at a wedding, because I don't know when the electronic shutter is going to, knock off my buffer and it stop actuating the shutter. So maybe even make those brackets red when it's not shooting. I'm not sure if it even does that now, but make those brackets red when it's not shooting and have it like red like it's recording, but it's just brackets that tell you I'm not shooting right now. So, and then also I've noticed that Canon has had a new patent out for like a vibrating or electronic shutter and vibration system in their cameras. That will be amazing if Canon had it in the R5 Mark II and in the R1, because now we can shoot, but not just willy-nilly. We don't know when that buffer hits, because typically when you get in the CF Express cards, you're probably going to get a higher end CF Express card with maybe 512 megabytes or gigabytes or 256 gigabytes, something like that. So you aren't limited on how many pictures you can take per event. Usually you're probably going to not get used to that, electronic shutter, especially if you're shooting like 30 frames a second. So that buffer is something you need to know about, and you need to be able to tactilely hear it or feel it on your finger. So that will be extremely good, because if it vibrates on your finger or it gives you like a click on your finger and you can feel it on the shutter button, then that would definitely help. But for those of us who use back button shutter, that might be a little bit of a getting used to. But yeah, definitely having a vibrating shutter button would help. I think I've gotten through everything that I've wanted to have. I mean, yeah, making the code better for the video and the Canon cameras would be better, but I don't know if they can do that. And that's pretty much it, guys. I know I went on and on in this video, but I'm really excited about this R5 Mark II because the R5 is probably one of the best cameras Canon has ever made, and in my opinion, one of the best cameras in the world. One of the best cameras because it has the full frame, good in images, excellent in images, excellent in video. The only thing about it is dealing with that video file is a little bit bad. It's hard, but Canon has some of the best colors. Canon has some of the best raw images that you ever seen. It's so easy for me. I love everything about this camera pretty much except the usability of it. Once Canon fixes that, you pretty much have the ultimate camera. It's very interesting to see what the cameras can go, what they can do. It's so exciting for me because I want to get the best and give my clients the best that my camera can offer, and I want to improve my skills to the point where the camera can give you something that nobody's ever seen before, or something that really impresses people. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I know this was a long video, but you saw how long it was. But I'm excited about this camera, guys. R5 is probably one of the most popular cameras Canon has ever made. And if you want to support me, I'll come up with some ways for you guys to support me. I haven't had a ironclad way of support other than the Amazon affiliate links that are in the description below. So if you want to buy the R5, affiliate links in the description below. When the R5 Mark II comes out, I'll have an affiliate link. Just remind me if I forget to put that affiliate link down in this video, because it's going to be made before the R5 comes out. And I'm Devin with Century FX Studios. Stay tuned for the next video.